Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Life Hacks with Mac. I'm very excited this afternoon to interview Graham Brown, who has a wealth of knowledge when it comes to veterans and ex-military staff, has recruited over 10,000 people in his time, set up is it an ex-Forces magazine?
That's right. Yeah,
back in 2001, if I'm correct?
98 that was, yeah. Even before that, yeah, long time ago.
So it's not something that you've just kind of dipped your toe into. This is your life.
That's right, yeah. Back in the days of hair.
The back. I'm a lot younger than what I look. You're also a Gulf War veteran.
That's right.
If I'm correct. And an ex-army musician, and you've studied at the prestigious Royal Military School of Kneller Hall. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah, Royal Military School of Music, Kneller Hall. Yes, I studied there when I served in the military. Yeah, great fun. One of the best years of my life.
And you've continued with that music journey as well, because you're in your part-time a musical director or vocal coach. Is it both?
Yeah, well, isn't it? It's a very interesting moonlighting topic. So I conduct in local group and prepare people for drama school. So I've got 4 kids off to drama school next month, which is great. You know, really good news, and great to see them all progress. So yeah, it's a real passion of mine as well.
Wow. Okay. And I'm sure we're going to go into that later, because today we're gonna cover a few different topics, and the main thing for me is the whole military and business, or ex-military perception in business, and why veterans are so great in the workplace. And what we want to get through today is really understanding the place of the transition from the veteran or ex-military side of things into the civvy lifestyle, as a lot of people put it. But then also the perceptions from businesses, whether it be small or large, when it comes to their perceptions of ex-military staff. And then also the perceptions for the ex-military staff of their transition of their skill sets into, some people call it the real world, but I'd like to kind of flip that on its head and say, actually, the military side is the real world. We have the soft touch. We get to go to the office and have disputes over who ate my lunch out of the fridge and that kind of thing, as opposed to some of the more serious conversations that our vets and current or ex-military would face. So hopefully we're going to have some interesting discussions around that. I also know, was your last position a lance corporal?
That's right, yes, left as a Lance Corporal. I think I'd reached that point in my career where I could have maybe pursued the course of becoming a bandmaster and gone back to Kneller Hall as a student bandmaster, and I'd have come out as a W01 after that. But I think around that time I was ready for a fresh challenge and ready to hit Civvy Street. So a number of reasons contributed towards that. But I was ready to tackle the world. Unleash myself.
Awesome stuff. I'm going to ask you to rewind a few seconds there, because you just said a few terms which I think the general public are going to go straight over. So W01?
So W01 is the highest ranking non-commissioned officer, and as a musician, you can pretty much transition from a private or a bandsman or a musician straight to W01. Quite a few people have done that. And you spend 3 years studying to become a bandmaster at Kneller Hall, and it's very, very intensive. So very often you'll have to understand how to orchestrate for each member of the military band and be able to play in each of those instruments to a reasonable standard. So it's a very intensive course. And when you're a brass player, you can play most of the brass instruments reasonably well. Trying to pick up a clarinet when you've never picked up a clarinet in your life is a bit of a challenge. So that would probably be my chosen course had I stayed in. The soldiering for me got in the way a little bit. I wasn't really a soldier. I joined up to be a a musician. And when I pitched up on my first day of basic training, my platoon commander called me in and said, "Right, Brown," he said, "you're off to Sandhurst." I said, "Well, sir, I joined up as a musician." He said, "A what?" He said, "No, you're going to Sandhurst." He said, "You've got all these qualifications, you need to be an officer." I said, "That's not what I joined up for." So he let me go with a kick up my backside, and I'd said, "Right, fine, go and be a musician then." But that was my chosen trade. That's what I wanted to do. And all the way through my last couple of years at school doing my A-levels, that was really what I was keen to do.
So that opens an interesting kind of caveat for us, because the perception that people have with regards to military is, there's so many different perceptions, and the general public, kind of think of people in the battlefield, and yet there's so many different skill sets that the military, as you said, you went in there for music, and it's not the natural path for somebody to think, well, I'm going to go study music, I'm going to join the military. It's it's like, and that for me is quite interesting. So, there must be so many different career paths that people go into, and just take me through maybe 5 or 6 different typical career paths that people take going into the military. That doesn't necessarily mean they're actually going, so the discipline and all the rest of the stuff is there, but it's not necessarily battlefield, if that makes sense.
Okay, so I'll give you a couple of different answers to the question. So my own career, my primary trade was a musician, and you mentioned the Gulf War earlier. You don't turn up in the Gulf with a trumpet. That just doesn't work. So my secondary trade was a medic. So I did my...
Sorry, the images in my head of, get out of my way.
Oh, the racket I can make with that thing, I'll tell you, Mike. I was trained as a medic. That was my secondary trade. So we got shipped out to the Gulf in 1991. Thought medicine, might be quite fun. So we practiced all our medical bits and pieces. We were able to do suturing and things like that as part of our trade, and we thought we were going to get to practice this in the Gulf. So that might have been quite interesting, something a little bit different. And we pitched up at a field hospital. So Tutu Field Hospital I served in Saudi. And the thing with the field hospital, when you've got a regimental medical assistant class 3 qualification, you are right at the bottom of the food chain. So when we pitched up expecting to do medicine, we went straight on to guard duty and pan bashing. Now, I didn't know what pan bashing was, so I was educated very quickly, and they used to call them the Dixies. So you get these massive pans like this with scrambled egg and a wire brush, an hour and a half to clean that out. Now that's character building for sure, and that's the kind of thing that the military throws at you. So we had some really interesting jobs there, but that was a job that needed done at the time, and we come back and started practicing music again. And there are something like 400 trades across the 3 services, and some people...
And I'm asking for 5 or 6.
I can give you a tiny pinch of a flavour. But some people stay in the same trade. They have all the way through the military and they do that as a civilian. Some retrade because they've disengaged with what they were doing in the military, and others find it really, like myself, find it really difficult to practice that trade. So a musician, when I left, there are very, very limited opportunities. I looked into being a brass teacher when I left, or possibly a singing teacher, but it takes quite a while to get into schools and things like that. So I did a behavioural assessment on the advice of my resettlement officer. He looked at my sheet and said, "Musician, don't know what to do with you. Why don't you pop off to your local job centre, do a psychometric assessment thing and see how that goes." So I did one of those, and that came up as you should be in sales and recruitment. I mean, that hasn't gone too badly. That's what I've been doing since I left, since '93. So that worked out quite well, but that was a very different path, sales. I think what the military does equip you with is the mindset and the capability to do many, many more things than your typical civilian employer might expect. And that's the really interesting takeaway, I think, Mike.
You know, you've touched on so many different things over there about, you know, the character building, the, you know, adapt kind of attitude. And, you know, I know somebody that we have in common that's been posting a lot on LinkedIn recently about the adapt mentality. And it is a, you know, it's a very special skill set to be able to have that mentality and discipline to, you know, compared to, I guess, a typical civilian who'll go into a job and won't necessarily get their hands dirty because it's not what they're used to. It's not something that they're not taught to think out the box and crack on and just get the job done. So I think there'll be more resistance from that perspective for a typical civilian compared to somebody with a military mindset where it's, let's just get it done. You know, the obstacles don't seem to be there.
Well, the best example, recent example I can give you of that is looking at COVID. Every day we looked at ministers, different ministers being wheeled out to talk about different things. The Prime Minister, the Education Minister, the Health Minister. We were getting different types of people rolling out to tell us different things. Loads of experts coming in to share details and data with us and best practices. Once they wheeled out a military officer. He was very matter of fact, straight to the point, to get the job done. That was absolutely fascinating. They built 9 hospitals in like 10 days. I mean, who builds a hospital in 9 days? But the military, they'll look at the brief. What's the task at hand? Adapt and overcome. We've got to get this done because it's going to save lives. They work out a plan, they get it done. The men go on the ground and the women go on the ground and they make it happen. That adapt and overcome mentality is built into the character of military. It's indoctrinated into you from day one. And I've carried those traits all the way through. I remember one moment in the Gulf when I was, we call it stagging on when you're on guard. So I was standing in the front gate with my stag partner with my rifle, thinking, I'm a trumpet player. What am I doing here? But I thought, well, hang on a minute. I'm here now. I can make the best of this situation. How can I use this to empower me? And the conversation I had with myself in that moment went like this. If I get through this, and don't forget that we expected this to be World War III. We thought we were going to be out there for 2 or 3 years when we pitched up. So I thought to myself, if I get through this, nothing else that life throws me for the next however many years is going to be as bad as I feel right now. You know, short of losing my parents, that's pretty much the case. And that mindset has carried me all the way through. And I still go back to that anchor moment and think, right, is it as bad as that? No, it's not. Let's move on. It's a little puzzle that we need to solve. And for pretty much every military character that I've engaged with over the years has got that built into them. It's just part of the fabric of military life. And that's if there's one takeaway I'd love a civvy employer to look at and say, well, what am I going to get? That is the single best thing.
I think you've just hit on some gold dust there, and you know, I want to expand on that. And I know through some of the questions that we've been asked on various different platforms, we're going to delve into some of the meat on that. So, you know, just to kind of manage expectations, and for those watching, I wanted to explain, you know, what we're going to do over the next few minutes as we go through this interview. Now, clearly, there's going to be some takeaways that are going to come out like we've just had now, and through the questions as we go along. However, you know, some key takeaways that we've already you know, got set up and coming for you later in this interview is, you know, having recruited over 10,000 people, the knowledge set that you have, you're going to give us some CV hacks and, you know, basically help people get their CV to the top of the pile. Is that right?
That's right, and that will be your secret, my secret, and your 12 million followers on YouTube.
We're gonna speak about employers on how to stop making costly bad hires as such. So recruiting people that I guess don't stick, and yeah. So what should be challenging as an employer at an interview, or what should you be challenging? Sorry, and that's an interesting one, because a lot of the time interviews, it's depending on the skill set of the person doing the interviewing, they're not necessarily challenging the individual. They're just asking questions, they get an answer. Some people are a lot more skilled at that process. I think, unfortunately, in what we find in smaller businesses, people haven't gone through that typical recruitment training mindset and the different styles of questioning to be able to elicit the real answers. So I'm really looking forward to that. So for businesses that haven't gone through that training, that's going to be quite key. And then what mistakes can you avoid during the hiring process? I think that's gold dust in itself, because that's probably one of the biggest fears. I saw somebody post on LinkedIn today about the entrepreneurial mindset of the solo business versus the person who has multiple staff. And one of the biggest fears they have is, what happens if I recruit somebody and I spend money on them, and then it all goes wrong, or they're the wrong person, or they do something, they're bad for my business, or so I'm really keen to find more about that. But we're going to stall on that and come back to that a little bit later. We're going to head into some questions that we've had. Now, I'm going to go straight to a question that I had from a veteran, Dave Edwards. And he asked an interesting question. He asked, when does a vet go from transitioning to fully transitioned, or is there such a thing?
You basically become a veteran when you hand your ID card in and step outside the front gate. So that you're a veteran forevermore. I think we often associate the word veteran with somebody with a walking stick and the Chelsea pensioners, and it's not quite true. That the term veteran is used regularly and has been for a number of years in the United States. But it's only really come into power in the last 10-15 years properly, I think, over here. And so yeah, when you've handed your ID card and you're out, then you're no longer a serving member of Her Majesty's Forces. You are now a veteran.
You've just answered one of my other questions, so thank you very much for jumping ahead.
I'm ahead of myself.
That is awesome. So would you say the answer to that question that Dave Edwards asked is you've made the transition once you've been handed that ID card?
Well, the transition piece is probably that's maybe a longer process. So to become a veteran, then that's your first day. Transition is, I think, really down to the individual, and a lot of that comes from the preparation they do before they leave. So if the best advice I can give on that is prepare early. And regrettably, some of the candidates who pitch up with us haven't organised their resettlement training. They've wasted their LCAS credits. I'll briefly explain what LCAS means for those unaware. Everybody in the forces knows what LCAS is. So that's enhanced learning credits. And basically you can tap into up to £6,000 worth of funding to help you with courses. Some of that can be taken in service, some of it post-service, up to 10 years after you leave. And many civvy employers don't know, in fact most civvy employers don't know about that. So that could be a real value add for recruiting a veteran. And Johnny Mercer MP, his office for Veterans Affairs, have been really good at trying to help to educate employers with one of their schemes is the company NI scheme, which is going through a consultation at the moment. And what they're looking to do with that is for any company employing a veteran from April next year, then they'll get their company NI for free for 12 months. which on a 20 grand salary I think is roughly a couple of grand. So it's quite a saving. So initiatives like that to help veterans and help employers to get that fit, I think is really, really important. But coming back to your question, it can be a tricky transition for some people that don't do that preparation. The ones who do it early and know what they want to do will start thinking about that a couple of years out. They'll plan their resettlement, they'll plan what they want to do with their LCAS, and they'll plan their career around that. And that's really smart. That gives you the very best chance of getting the right opportunity and not coming out and taking the first job that lands. And if we speak to a veteran who's a little bit all over the place and not sure what they want to do, that happens. Then we'll try and get the right fit of organisation for them, because at the end of the day that should be a symbiotic fit, and if the employer and the candidate are truly committed to that, then that's where a little bit of magic happens. That's where you get somebody who's likely to stay in the organisation for a few years rather than last a few months, and that's true of veterans or anybody really.
So I have another question. It's just kind of off the back of that LCAS funding. Is that something that the vets would go and apply for themselves, or is it something they would apply for with an organisation, and the organisation and them would work on that process, or talk us through that? So
the veteran has control of that funding. Now some will do will spend the 6 grand in advance of leaving. Some leave all of it till they leave because they haven't decided how they're going to use it. So that can then be used in consultation with an employer, and it's different for everybody, Mac. But it's important that employers know about it so they can inquire about it at interview stage, because they may well be able to, rather than funding courses themselves, they can get the MOD to fund. But to become a preferred supplier, you would need to go through LCAS accreditation as a training organisation.
Okay, so I mean that opens a couple of other questions for me. One, what type of organisations, we hear a lot of lip service paid to the support of veterans post post-service as such. So once they become a veteran, or they're ex-military or Navy or whatever direction they've come from, what organisations, let's talk UK specific now, back the support of recruiting specifically veterans in the marketplace? I mean, are there charities, organisations, or is there accreditations where you can go, especially for vets, to go and search for a list of companies that are pro recruiting veterans?
Yeah, good question. So that would fall down to the employer recognition scheme, and you can go through 3 different types of awards around that scheme: your bronze, silver, and gold. So we hold the silver award under the employer recognition scheme. So it's a commitment to recruit and support veterans, and we're hoping to go for our gold next year. But it's quite an undertaking to go through that process. Yeah.
What's the significance? I mean, how large is the list of people that have any of those accreditations, whether it be bronze, silver, or gold?
Hundreds, yes, hundreds of organisations on there, and that number is growing every week. How committed are those organisations? That's a difficult question to answer. I think I've heard some organisations use it as a tick box exercise. I've seen other organisations being very heavily committed to it, and to actively go out and recruit and support veterans, which is the whole point of the scheme. And that's wonderful to see. That's exactly what we want. When it's a tick box exercise, it's completely pointless.
And I get that. I mean, those are some of the questions that I want to get into today. But and for those watching, if you're watching this on whether it be on LinkedIn or YouTube or whatever platform, please go and comment, what your experience has been with regards to, if you've followed that route where you've, tried to make life easy, go and see who's going to support, people such as yourselves, and whether you've had, success or resistance, or just, potentially found, people to be tick box exercise kind of followers. And let's have that discussion and see where that goes, because I think for anybody, a lot of businesses will support a charity because it looks good for them, for their audience, and for their customers and their clients. But it's actually the ones who fully, that's part of their values, they truly believe in what they've committed to. And that's what I'm interested in finding out, is who are those organizations that are truly committed to helping not only the veterans because of the service they've done for the country, or veterans across the world that have served their own countries, but helping those people with the skill sets that we're going to go into now, and you've already alluded to, really maximize the opportunity for those businesses as well as those individuals, because it's almost like a no-brainer from what you've mentioned so far with regard to the mindset of a veteran. So, I guess let's go into some of those other questions. Is there anything else that you wanted to kind of expand on that?
No, I think it is absolutely a mindset, and some of those organisations have got armed forces champions, which their job is to actively promote internally and externally. And the list of military charities that support different facets of military people, spouses, veterans, housing, mental health, the British Legion, an organisation called Ex-Forces as well, which help business startups. I know that's one you mentioned that earlier, that's one of the questions later. But some great charities that are there to support different facets of military life, and some of the support that they give is absolutely critical and can be life or death when you get people in really difficult moments, because that sometimes happens post-service as well. And having charities you can call upon to support whatever they're going through is absolutely paramount.
So, and one of the things I'm going to ask you just off the back of what you've just mentioned is if you could please supply me with some links to those organizations that we can put in the description of this video, so that if somebody's watching, they either need help with regards to recruitment, or they need help with regards to the transition process, or one of those charities that can help because of depending on what level of service they've been through, whether there's post-traumatic challenges that they potentially face, so that we can give them those resources and contact details. They'll be, I think, really useful.
I'll give you the direct link to the employer recognition scheme itself. And I mean, hey, if there are organisations out there who are using it as a tick box exercise, for me that's unacceptable. You either commit to this or you don't, and if you don't, you'll get called out. And if you do, that's wonderful, and you'll get called out for being wonderful, and you'll get some great PR. So I don't sit on the fence with that, Mac, at all.
And that's a good thing. I mean, I know with some of our previous conversations, having spent, and you don't look a day over 25. It's just but the experience and the wealth of knowledge that you have in the industry. I mean, you are truly an industry expert, because you deal with, firstly, finding people jobs. You deal with the big organizations. You deal with the different charities and organizations that deal with all these challenges. You're a behavioral coach as well, so you can take people through that transition and understand where to kind of match those gaps. There is really a massive opportunity for businesses to shortcut a lot of the pain points that they get by recruiting the right people. And this mindset is just tapping into a really golden resource that just makes sense. I know one of the natural kind of paths for military tends to be going into services like the police force, And I know in the US, there weren't any current UK stats, but in the US, about 20% of veterans end up going into the police force. And I think in the US, 6% of the general population make up the actual veteran population, which is quite a large number. What is your experience with that as a transition here in the UK?
It's a very successful transition. It's an obvious one for many. I wouldn't say it's anything like as high as the number you quoted for the States. We tend to see a lot of people transitioning into engineering, into logistics, project management, and one very interesting area is looking at people who don't have a trade. You know, that's been a very interesting mindset shift, I think, over the last 10 to 15 years. So if I look back earlier in my career, when I was placed next military into employment, I got quite a bit of resistance, I think, from some employers who couldn't quite connect the dots between somebody I was trying to present to them and what they needed. So that was for me a bit of an education piece to try and help them to understand what they were looking at and to explain some of the military terminology that would help them to realise actually they've got kind of a real golden egg here. And that was one of the early challenges. And I had one employer say about 15 years ago, "You're not going to send me Windsor Davis, are you?" You know, and for those who remember Windsor Davis, he was the old kind of handlebar moustache sergeant major in 8.5 Hot Mum. And I just thought, oh really, are we having this conversation in this day and age? I think that wouldn't even be said tongue-in-cheek now, I don't think, because the shoulders have been rounded significantly in the last 10 to 15 years. And I think if there's anything we have to thank the operations in the Middle East for, one of the few things, it would be that, because I think the Winning Hearts and Minds operations have softened the public's attitude towards the military in general. And I think that's made a difference. And the military themselves, especially the army, has had to adapt to that square-shouldered approach. And it is just different. So the type of candidate that you'll get now is not what you'd have got 15 to 20 years ago. The military has moved with the times for the most part. And a lot of the older officers, the older school officers, who were a little bit more square-shouldered and didn't share those values, a lot of those old school sergeant majors that I mentioned earlier, there's just no place for them in the modern fighting world. It's, you know, times have moved on, which I believe makes the military candidate of today significantly more employable, because the mindset and the skills, the attitude, is just something that I don't think many civvies would see in a civvy. And that indoctrination process I mentioned earlier, Mark, the people that I see, the can-do attitude, the loyalty, the integrity, just the way of getting a job done in a really calm fashion. They don't often get flustered, and because they're trained to stay calm under pressure, and all of those amazing traits that they're able to bring to civvy employers, I think the message is starting to get through. But I'm on an education crusade at the moment to try and encourage as many people to get that as possible.
I think it's an interesting thing, because if you look at some of the challenges are typical, and don't get me wrong, I'm not discounting our civvy population at all, because we have a phenomenal skill sets that are developed through other education paths as well. But I think the mindset, if you look at how the ex-military people have adapted to things like our COVID situation and just moving forward and finding a way, finding solutions, stepping through the pain, where, you know, I've heard a lot of civvy conversations around, oh, you know, I've had such a challenging day, you know, my Zoom went down, And you kind of listen to some of these conversations. You think, well, third world, first world problems, and you're like, hold on, like what's? It's just there's almost like a real problems and then perceived problems. Well, that's not almost. Yeah.
Let me give you a great example. I placed a vehicle mechanic about 5 or 6 years ago, and we always have a check-in with employers to make sure things have gone okay, candidates got started, how they're getting on, and we check in with candidates as well, just to make sure that's a good fit, especially in those early stages. So I phoned the employer after a couple of weeks, and I said, how's he getting on? He said, yeah, he's getting on well. I said, right. I said, there's a question mark over that. What's happened? He said, right, well, I gave him a key to the workshop, and he said, I was driving past the workshop the other night, and the light was on. I thought, oh, somebody left the light on. He said, so I parked the car up, went in, and he said he's got the engine of one of the cars stripped back to component level, everything laid out on the floor, all numbered. And I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm fixing the engine. And he said, you just order another part. He said, but if a vehicle breaks down in the desert, we have to fix it. But that's the quality of the mindset I'm talking about. Now, the part of that is an education piece of becoming a civvy. But it was a little bit tongue in cheek, but it was a really nice anecdote, and for me, it sums up the attitude. I should have clocked off a couple of hours ago, but this needs to get fixed because the customer's going to pick it up in a couple of days. So I've got to get it done. So they just stay back till the job's done. Whereas a lot of other people will clock off, your military guy stays back to make sure it's finished.
It's almost like that saying of not leaving any man behind. It's the job gets done.
Right, exactly that.
And it's interesting because and I'll give it a little bit. I won't go too much into this, but this is a bit of my personal mindset. So one of the challenges that I face in life, and a lot of people do with regards to, I guess, success in business, is you can go through when you start something but you don't finish it, and that used to be one of my kind of downfalls. I start a project, this is exciting, and then no, move on to the next thing. And a good friend of mine called it butterfly mentality. And I was like, oh, that's a good thing. They pollinate flowers. That's good. But I kind of realized after a while, I was like, hold on. Was he being sarcastic and just being nice? And I realized that, having that laser focus of getting the job done is such it's a skill set that very few people teach, and in the military it's like a natural outcome.
That's right. Yeah, it's almost like they line the people up when they start their basic training, and there's various plugins that they plug people into at different stages of their basic training, and then through the early part of their career and their advanced training. And their trade training beyond that as well, and all of that just kind of fuses into one single-minded mentality. There are exceptions, of course, but for
as with everything,
99% of what I see and what I deal with and who I interview on a day-to-day basis is playing at that outstanding level and just knocks it out of the park. They're a real pleasure to deal with, and it's a privilege to work with them.
It's there's so many questions that are going to come off. I'm conscious that I have to answer some of these questions where people have taken the time. So I'm going to go into those, if that's okay with you, because I think we're going to answer a lot of the other questions that will spin off the back of that, so that we can get into those 4 takeaways that you've promised everybody. So, first question over here, Brian Kirk. I haven't done a CV in 20 years. How would somebody like you be able to help them?
I'm going to build that into one of my takeaways.
Okay.
That's a great question, but the CV hacks, I think, will answer Brian's question. That sits beautifully in there. Yeah, I'll answer.
I like that. Then this one is from Thomas Wassel. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly. what value can a veteran really bring to a business, and why is this different to a civilian? Now, I know we've already touched on some of that, but
yeah, we've covered quite a bit of that. So I believe the veteran mentality outstrips pretty much everything I've seen with most civvies. You get some outstanding civvies. I've worked with had the privilege of working with some outstanding civvies, but it's just built into military culture. That mindset, the can-do attitude, all the traits that we mentioned earlier, which just go on and on and on. They're just built in a different way. They're created in a different way, and that attitude for me that they take all the way through their life, and I'm a product of that as well. I've lived that and I've understood it, and I practice it every day. Not always consciously. But because it's built into who I am and my character now, I think those people are the best equipped to do some of the best jobs in the country.
I couldn't have said that any better. And you know, with the points that we've already touched on, with the golden nuggets of what you get out of the mindsets and everything else, I think that expands very nicely on that. Now, the next question from, it's Will, I'm not sure if it's Nagel or Nagel.
Probably Nagel, yeah.
Nagel. So being originally South African over almost 20 years ago, that I moved over to the UK, I would pronounce that Nagel, but it all depends on what the origin is. So I'm gonna go with Nagel for the UK audience. He's asked, why did you set up your business?
So if I there's a couple of reasons. One, I got tired of working for somebody else, and secondly, I didn't have a particularly good resettlement experience. My resettlement officer at the time didn't know what to do with me. A musician was an unusual trade. And what I mentioned about popping off to the local job centre, it wasn't a great experience. It took me probably 6 months to settle into a good sales job with a good training policy. I sold some of the businesses I worked with in my early stages, selling door-to-door alarms in the pouring rain. Not a lot of fun. Zenith windows.
I've been there, done that. Yeah.
And working for a leisure company, and it was really, really. I don't mind hard work, but when you're trying to phone a customer in the middle of EastEnders, that's not going to end well. But I got involved in a publishing company who had a good professional sales training approach, and that made a world of difference to me. That helped me to settle in then. So I wanted to help to prevent a lot of people from having that same experience, and I always deeply cared about what happened to veterans, and I don't think I've spent now 24 years of my life involved with helping veterans to transition and get into work and help them with the CVs and interview techniques and things like that. You don't do something like that and spend that amount of time with that amount of passion if you don't care. So I put all my weight behind that, and that's why I'm still here today doing what I'm doing and loving it.
And why you've had the success you have. Wow, okay. So, interesting question from Beju Solanki, where he's asked, how many actually go on to set up their own business?
Oh, okay. I couldn't pluck a number off the top of my head. What I could tell you is it's a lot more than you might think. And I think the reason for that is a lot of people come out and don't necessarily find the right space for themselves in Civvy Street. And all the skills that we mentioned earlier, all the great personal skills that the military teaches you, are perfect for a business owner, for setting up your own team. And I'm a business captain for an organisation called Forces, and they were set up by Lieutenant Colonel Ren Kapoor, and her mandate was to help businesses transition from military to civvy. So all the people she represents, all the stakeholders in there, everybody she coaches and trains and mentors are all veterans. And they've supported over 2,000 ex-veterans into employment over the last 5 years, and funded. So they do funded courses. I think they've funded over 15 million. So that's amazing. So they're doing a great job just on that. The British Legion used to run a scheme as well, and that's where I got some of my startup funding from the British Legion, and that helped me to take those first few steps into running my own business. So there are a lot of people who do it, and there's an organisation called Veterans Owned as well, which is again a lot of small businesses who connect with each other and help and support each other in different ways. So there's lots of it around. Great question.
Wow. And typically, what type of sectors would, if you look at those 2,000 startups, what is the kind of common thing or theme that you see for people starting up their own businesses? Just to give
there really isn't. So there's you've got recruitment. You've got one guy set up a high-end coffee making company. So they do military coffee beans. One set up a gin company. Another set up a distillery. One set up a really successful telecoms business. It's wherever their passion is, and if you're going to set up a business, that's where you should target it. If you've got a passion about something, that's the best single answer for setting up on your own. And
you mentioned at the beginning of this interview, what was it, 40,000 different trades? Is that what you said?
400.
400.
Yeah, 40,000 would be.
I was just thinking, wow, but even 400 is 400. Different trades that's a serious amount of variety that you can apply to different business startups.
Right, and if you look at the guy who set up the coffee business, where does that idea come from? It comes from somebody who's got a love of coffee. And you could generate a love of coffee while you're in the military, but that wouldn't necessarily set you up in that way. So a lot of those ideas, that entrepreneurial mindset, I think a lot of the spirit of that is built in the military. And sometimes that is for people who want to go into a job. Sometimes it's created for those who want to set up their own business.
I think it's an interesting one, because the people every day leaving the military service and transitioning into civil lifestyle, and knowing that there are so many different avenues of support to go and start your own business, and that you can be a bit creative and actually do something that you love doing, as opposed to just settle for anything. Now, off the back of that, I think the next question kind of feeds nicely into that, because the question's by Dan Anderson Tufnell, where he asks, if a veteran's creating awareness and using LinkedIn as a platform as an example, what should they do? If they've got this passion, they found something that they want to do, they want to start up, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think get the profile up to date on LinkedIn. Start following and watching people that you have an interest in and want to connect with. Comment on what they're posting. Look at the recruiters that you want to connect with. Connect with them. Engage with them. Have a conversation. And make some demands of them. You want a bit of their time, but where can you add value to them as well? So much of the what's been created on LinkedIn over the last 2 or 3 years is about adding value. So where can you add personal value? And that's not necessarily just an organisation. If you go in with a mindset like that, then you get your best possible chance. But a lot of the LinkedIn profiles that I look at, they're not a great shop window for somebody. So get that up to date and be smart about what you put in there, and make sure you can be found as well. All your keywords and everything that's important for anybody searching for you, whether that's an agency, an organisation, an individual, get it in there, make sure it's in your profile, and then go to town, get busy with connecting and commenting.
I think for anybody, because that's quite an expansive subject, the whole LinkedIn side of things, and I know that can get us going off a slight little tangent, but what I'd suggest is anybody who has any questions on that and want to reach out to Graham or to myself and ask questions on the LinkedIn side of things, how do you do things properly, feel free to comment below, and we can reach out and give you some tips and guidance on that very easily. Good. So the next one is from Matt Lewis, and he asks, how quickly have candidates you've placed been able to pick up the new technical role?
Probably depends on the role, but I think the military candidates adapt very quickly to their environments. And if you look at the Defence Training Review at the back end of the 90s looked to try and standardise military training. So, for example, they set up a Defence College of Communications for ICT in Blandford. And what they did there was they pulled the training from the RAF, the training from the Army, the training from the Navy, and they looked across these sectors, brought in course designers to look at, and training analysts to look at what was covered in the trade training for each of the three services. And lo and behold, 70 to 75% of it was exactly the same. And they thought, hang on a minute, we've got a school for the Army, we've got a school for the Navy, we've got a school for the RAF. Ding! What if we got one school where we put everybody through? Makes total sense. So that's exactly what they did. And then they started offering civilian qualifications as part of the trade training. So when I served, I was an A1 musician. And in layman's terms, that means that that's kind of up to degree standard. It means that I can play all my scales on a particular instrument. It means that I can arrange for a band. But to Civvy, what does A1 mean? Absolutely nothing. A degree, oh, I get that. An NVQ, I understand that. A professional qualification, makes sense. And that's, I think, the great gift that came out the back of the Defence Training Review. So the first CV I remember looking at when I set FRS up had A1, B2, C3, that kind of language. Now I understood the military terminology around that and what those courses included. Civvy would have no chance. But that is different now. Those military qualifications, most of them are cross-mapped to Civvy qualifications, so that it actually means something to a Civvy. Put that on the CV now. Okay,
I was just going to ask if you're still seeing the translation requirement from kind of military.
Let me add something to that, because that's a slightly different question. So I've been asked many times about demilitarising CVs, so that's a different thing from the qualifications. So I would say absolutely never in a million years demilitarise your CV. I had a CV from a guy a few months ago, and he'd applied for a job. And he said, can you tell me why we didn't put me forward for this? And I said, well, the client needs somebody ex-military. That's what we do. He said, I'm ex-military. He said, I've been a warrant officer for 22 years. Well, not a warrant officer for 22 years. Was in for 22 years and left as a warrant officer. And I said, what is it? Let's get your CV up. So I had a look at it again. And I said, what does it say that on your CV? And he said, well, look, that was my last posting. I said, I'll tell you what you look like from what I'm reading here. I said, you look like a civil servant who was attached to bases. I said, that doesn't say military at all to me. And that was an important lesson. And some people also, they don't put their contact details in the CV for security reasons. I can understand that, but how's somebody supposed to get in touch with you? Make it easy for an employer and an agency to find the right search terms. So here's the little nugget here. What you should do is don't demilitarise your CV, put the military terms in there, but explain them. Don't assume that a civvy is going to understand that, but explain what it is, and then you get the best of both worlds. You get the military search terms in there, and you get a bit of understanding for a civvy employer who has no knowledge of reading a military CV.
I think that's gold dust, because I see that far too often where people are trying to speak the language of the organization they're trying to join, yet the organization is looking for their specific skill set to bring in. And because they've removed that, trying to already look like the role they're trying to go into, they've already just cut themselves out of the selection process.
That's right. Yeah, 100%. Don't do it.
Good. So the next question is from Maria Kosova, which asks, what skill learned in the military is valuable in business and will help veterans with their transition?
Absolutely mindset. All the traits that we covered earlier. It's for me, it's all about the mindset. You'll get some of the best qualified engineers, logistics people, telecoms engineers in the world, because the trade training is of such a high standard. An example of that, they used to call the artificers course in the REME the divorce course, because it was a 2-year, highly intensive technical course. And people got into that, didn't often survive it, because it's the absolute creme de la creme of the military. So that is just one isolated example. So, but the mindset to get through something like that, you've got to be good. So 100% mindset.
It just the way you described that, and my perception and thinking, because I know what education generally costs, and you look at the education that goes into military and the cost behind that, and you think about the fact that you can recruit somebody at a annual salary anywhere between 30 and 150, 200,000, whatever the price is for that specific role, but the education itself that went into that individual far supersedes what you're paying for.
Oh, totally. So my, just to pick up on that point, my course at Kneller Hall, I was told would have cost in 1989 £30,000 for a year, because they got the best professors into Kneller Hall to coach, and I couldn't leave the military for 3 years after that. So I had to stay in for another 3 years, or I would have to buy myself out. And 30 grand is don't have that in my back pocket. So I had to make sure that I saw out my service. But the value I got from that course, again, the musical people that I worked with, the students, the professors, just a very high standard of people. A couple of the guys who taught me, I was in awe of them. There's like I had a trumpet and a cornet teacher, Willie Lang, taught me cornet. He's the champion cornet player of Black Dyke Mills, one of the top brass bands in the world. And the guy who taught me trumpet was the principal trumpet player at Phantom of the Opera. I mean, wow, it's so cool. And I get lessons from these guys every week. It's incredible.
And that, I think that's also one of the things that people miss when they think about sending potentially their children into military, is they don't realize the investment and the access they get to such high level education and skills and discipline and mindset, which in some countries it's I know in South Africa it was it was mandatory for you to go and do service up until the year I left school, and I was sitting there going, I'm going, and then it was not mandatory anymore, and then various other things happened, and I went straight into work, and I really had wished that I'd been able to go and get that discipline, because, and this is for those people that are in the civvy mindset out there, I believe it took me an extra 10 years to achieve the right mindset in business that I could have got in 1 or 2 years of being in the military.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And that's something, and that's one of the reasons I was so excited about doing this interview, because it is Life Hacks with Mac, and for me, it's if you can shortcut things, not hack it so that it's a quick fix, not a plaster on a gaping wound. I'm talking about really hacking into expert knowledge, fast tracking things, because mindset is the biggest challenge most people face in life. And if you can start off with that in the beginning, and then just imagine what is possible if you can get your mindset right at an early stage in life, what is possible moving forward, rather than searching to, because if you look at personal development space, you know, how many people are going out there for education on mindset, and they're not in their, you know, their 20s, 30s, they're in their 50s, 60s, still trying to figure things out. And a lot of those people they're not ex-military. And that's what I'm finding, you know, although I'm finding the ones that are, I guess, leaders in those spaces happen to be ex-military who are teaching the mindset. So, you know, again, there's a hack for you, you know, go and learn the mindset early so that you can really enjoy life and get the best out of it. So next question, and we're going to need to fire through some of these, is what is the most overlooked skill that a veteran brings to transfer to civvy life? That's from Jane Gunn.
I think same as the last question, is absolutely about mindset. Yeah, top of the tree for me.
Yeah, and I can see that very clearly, and it's one of those things that I wish I'd done years ago. So the next one is, what's the one thing you can do to improve? And this is an interesting one, is the perception of ex-military personnel. This is by Lisa Zevi.
Okay, education, I think, and that's I've taken that on as a personal responsibility to try and educate employers what skills servicemen and women can give them as potential employees, and to be honest, I think every veteran should go on the same crusade and comment on things like this and open up these discussions so that they get the message. I think some of the great work that Johnny Mercer's office, the Office for Veterans Affairs, is doing. He's very passionate about supporting veterans, being a veteran himself. He was a veteran of Afghanistan, and all the work that he's doing now to try and educate as well, and educate from the inside of Parliament outwards is brilliant. It's not going to be an overnight fix, but I think it has to be continually reinforcing the message about how good these guys are, and to employ them. You know, come and talk to me, talk to others, and give these guys a chance.
You know, the next question kind of feeds into that perception thing, because the question is about, you know, what are the typical type of companies that actually are supporting veterans out, you know, on those lists, or those charities or those organizations you referred to right in the beginning. You know, just off the top of your head, can you think of some of the big names people would recognize that actually support, you know, taking on veterans?
Well, every defence company, it's a very obvious place to go, but your BAE Systems and Thalases of this world, they will, all the defence companies pretty much exclusively would be signed up to the corporate covenant and have a commitment to recruit veterans. And it's not those obvious places that I would like to get into. You know, I want to educate some of the engineering companies, logistics companies, facilities management, health and safety, areas where for me it's really obvious where a veteran might go, where they can. Yeah, whether they have a technical skill at that or not, you know, a lot of what we talked about earlier with the military mindset, you know, the infantrymen and infantrywomen, those without a trade, they go on very often to become planners, project managers, program managers, general managers, because they're so good with people. They're used to managing people, they're used to managing situations, they're used to being under pressure, and they just deal with that stuff so well. So, yeah, give them a chance.
You know, for me, I would have assumed that's a logical kind of path, but clearly it's not, and the opportunities are not being matched, which which means there's a massive gap that, that education, just to take people through and link those, those skill sets that are already so ingrained in our military staff.
That's right. And that's where there should be a value in the corporate covenant, because that takes things a step further. It says we are committed to this. So if you are committed to this, then deliberately go and find and seek out veterans. That's what companies like that should be doing, and that's a list that should be ever growing, in my opinion.
I was just going to say, I think that should be the case, but for a civilian who's not into the defence world and wouldn't know many of the defence companies, are there any typical civilian type businesses that we could think of that already support these schemes?
If you look at, I would need to look at the list to see who is actually committed to recruiting veterans, and I'll give you the list of the companies later that are committed to the schemes. And I think when you start to look through there, then I hope that you would start to see companies who have taken that step to say, yes, this is a commitment, and we follow through and we take it seriously. We have an armed forces champion, and this is part of our mandate. I mean, there are companies in America, Mark, who set out in their manifesto, their commitment, their vision, that they will recruit military, and some of them even have a percentage that they expect of roles will be fulfilled by veterans, some up to 10%, and that's great. I mean, that is a real heavy commitment, but that's wonderful. I strongly believe in that. That's where we should be, I think.
I'd love to start seeing which of the the big names that we deal with on a daily basis have got that form of commitment out there, because we have commitments towards energy saving and saving our planet and all these other things, but the commitment to those people that are serving our country. And before I go into the next question, one of the other mindset things, and I know I've alluded to this with you in the past, is the whole perception. I was dumbfounded when I went onto YouTube, as an example, and started just searching what the perception was. And for some reason, there's this very high level of respect and kind of admiration for the military, and it's only US based. Like in the US, it's like there's just such praise for ex-military and veterans. It's just like, it's really astounding. But I didn't see other countries that follow in that suit. I mean, what's with that?
I wish I could answer that, Mike. You very kindly posted a precursor to our interview on LinkedIn today and thanked me for my service. You're the second person who has ever done that. There's somebody said that to me the other day. I wasn't quite sure what to say, because it's commonplace in America to thank people for their service. And I think in this country, the best way of answering that is that we're very British, and for the most part, veterans, they think it's part of their job. Remember, we sponsored the Resettlement Awards about 3-4 years ago, and Bill Turnbull was the compere, and the guy who won the award for the best service leaver had been in an accident in Afghanistan, had lost both his legs, and set up a business and was doing really well. And Bill Turnbull said, "Wow, so you must be so proud of yourself." Yeah, yeah, not really, but yeah. Okay, but you've achieved so much, and you've been through such a traumatic experience. Oh, yeah, other people have been through this as well. You've had both your legs blown off, but how do you find that courage? Oh, you just get on with it, don't you? And Bill Turnbull's a great interviewer, but he didn't know what to do with this guy. But that's the essence of the veteran. It's no fuss. Something happens to you. It's not ideal, but you get on with it. You adapt. You overcome. And that might sound like an extreme case, but I've heard hundreds of such cases where veterans just get on with it. There's no point in hanging your head. It's not going to help you. So you just get on.
you know, for me, that's such a massive distinction with regards to, you know, I've worked in sales for over 20 odd years. I've recruited thousands of people into various different roles. And one of the biggest challenges I've always found, and we're going to go on to that in a few minutes, hopefully, is finding the right candidates. And you know, I've been dumbfounded when somebody's been given that, you know, in the interview process, they tell you about how committed they are to the job and how they really want it and they want to prove themselves. And they go through they say all the right things. And about 2 weeks into the role, you know, they at 5 p.m. on a Friday, or even 3 o'clock on a Friday, you go to them and ask them if they've completed a certain thing, and they're going, yeah, but it's not. I'm not sure if that's kind of part of my job description. I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, you know, and they'll find every reason under the sun to kind of not get certain things done, and then but 5 o'clock, it's Friday. It's almost like, but it's pub time. And it's like, you haven't completed the job that you set out, and it's now Friday, and you set this out, you know, maybe on Monday or even 2 weeks before, and you set yourself a goal, and you haven't. I mean, it's not like it's life-threatening. You're going to have your legs blown off. This is literally you're not even going to get a paper cut, and you just have to, like, and it seems like such a big obstacle to overcome, where that mindset of, my legs got blown off, but I just got the job done. It's like, I mean, isn't that that's huge?
Yeah, the juxtaposition of that is interesting, that's probably one of the things when leaving the military is not easy to adapt to, is the civvy mindset, because it's very different. And that takes a little bit of getting used to. I think it's easier for military transitioning now than it was 20 years ago, because the cliff face isn't as stark as it was back then. But it's still a shift, you know, because you're used to giving and following orders. And you know, you try and do that to somebody you're from Generation Z, and you know, you've got that kind of, well, you know, I'll do it later, I'll do it next week, and I mean, I think that drives normal people nuts. You know, I'm picking on Generation Z a little bit, but I think that is a frustration. I think probably for civvies as well as military. I don't think that's just a military thing.
But military would be just over the top a little. Okay, so moving into the next one, which was what top 5 mistakes do people do make during the recruitment process because they just never had training on it? That's Paul Evans.
Probably they touched on this a little bit. They don't. A lot of them don't believe in themselves. They've got their head down. They're doing a job. You might think of you know, the capabilities and everything they've got, but many of these guys haven't been for a job interview in 20 odd years. It's a big jump to move career when you've had a safety blanket wrapped around you for so long. So the belief is not always there. So some of the coaching that we'll do to help them to prepare for interviews is just to try and instill a bit of confidence in them, and make them believe that they are, well, I think, better than their civvy counterparts. I have to prepare them like that. They're not, you know, not everyone's like that. Some have got a good level of confidence before they leave, but very often I've seen that showing up a number of times. Very often guys will leave the resettlement too long as well. They get busy with their day job, and they'll leave the resettlement to like the last month. How can you plan your last couple of years and what your career is going to be like post-service when you haven't planned your resettlement out properly? And some of them just miss it out and then realise, oh, I'm out in a month, what am I going to do? Many times I've spoken to people, so my recommendation on that is plan, you know, and prepare for leaving a couple of years out. There's an organisation called the CTP who assists people leaving the forces, which we work very closely with. So work with them, work with your consultant, work with us to get you prepared in the right way, so that the courses are targeted, your resettlement is targeted, and you know what you're going to do. Don't let resettlement happen to you. and very often some people will also they'll waste money on the resettlement grant or their LCAS funding. We talked about that earlier. That's really important to tune that up to do what you want. You know, I've seen guys doing bricklaying courses and things like that. If you're going to be a brickie or a tradesman, that's cool. That's absolutely what you should be doing. But I've seen people who want to build a wall at home, so they'll do a bricklaying course. When are you ever going to build a wall again? You know, maybe I'm being unfair, but I don't see the point. Use something that is going to help you in your second career, and make sure you get that targeted in the right way.
I think that's a really, really important question to ask yourself is, will I be using this again when you're investing your time there? The next one, what's the number one mindset shift that a service leader needs to overcome before they transition into the civvy life? That's by Adam Bonner.
That's belief, I think. But belief in themselves, their own ability, their capabilities, I think I would say probably 80% of people I speak to don't think they're anywhere near as good as they actually are. And if I measure them against their civvy counterparts, they have the edge, and they don't see it. So that, again, that's part of our coaching. Help them to see that, to see the edge, and help employers to see what difference. If I'm comparing my best civvy candidate with my best military candidate, my military candidate is going to get that every time. Sometimes it's very fine margins, but that's why we do what we do. Otherwise, I'd just be a recruitment consultant, not an ex-military recruitment consultant.
And I think, if I could allude to an interesting situation I had a few years ago, where I recruited somebody, and the belief system and the mindset was actually the reason initially I turned them away. And I had this individual come, and when I asked questions about their experience, they were, well, I haven't really done much. And they were very fluffy around their experience. And I really had to work hard to try and figure out what they had done and what experience they had. And I sat there and I was thinking, what has this guy been doing? He says, oh, well, I worked for the sales organization for about 6 months, and then I tried to do this. And thinking, well, this guy's in his late 40s, and surely there's more to the surface. And anyway, I sent him away, and I was like, well, thank you very much, but I want you to go back, because I knew there was something. There was a golden nugget here, but I knew the belief system and the mindset was not in the right place. So I sent him away. I said, I want you to come back next week. I don't want you to come back as whatever you've just told me. I want you to come back and tell me the real, who you are, what you do, and fill me in. Comes back, and this guy was ex-Air Force, ex-pilot. He'd been made redundant after 20 odd years in the service. And that had knocked his confidence sideways. And I was sitting there going, you've done what? You've flown which aircrafts at what speed and had what pressure? And then he went and worked with Boeing, and he flew some of the biggest leaders in the world as their private pilot around the world. But he came to me like he had no skill sets. And I looked at him and I went, what the heck happened here? And he just looked at me and goes, well, I just never thought that would be relevant. I was like, man, this is so cool. I was like, you've got it. That's your, you have that as a strapline in your story. Any conversation that you have with people, they're going to be sitting there going, I'll buy from this guy. I mean, come on, he's flown it. It's just, you've got to go and look at your skill sets and the things you do and really appreciate the value that you can offer the world. So, if anybody takes anything away from that, really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So reach out to Graham and make sure that you go and get a proper assessment and introduction into how you should approach things. Don't sell yourself short. So the next one, what's the number one mindset shift? We've just done that. Why do recruiters not appreciate or recognize the skills the service personnel of all disciplines can bring to the civilian market? And what strategies can you recommend to overcome the issue? That's by Ron Pooley.
Yeah, this is another one we touched on earlier. I think we all have a responsibility as veterans to educate employers to understand what we as veterans can bring to their organisations. That also though has to be presented in the right way, and that's one of my hacks that I'm going to come on to in a wee while. And this consultation as well that's going on about the NICs for employers as well through the Veterans Office. I think that together with veterans and the Veterans Office, government trying to make a difference through Johnny Mercer's office, I think we can make some changes for sure. But it's been relentless. You know, this is not something that we're going to affect in the next day or the next week. This needs to be a constant commitment now from veterans who are leaving, from veterans who have been out for a couple of years, from veterans who've been out for 10, 20 years, to keep reinforcing that message. Do it from inside. You know, if you're a veteran in an organisation and you see this, go and talk to somebody. Talk to your boss and say, why we're not recruiting more veterans? You know, how great am I? Do you want another 10 of me? Go and talk to Graham. Thank you very much. But that needs to happen.
Yeah.
But that's not just my responsibility. Veterans themselves need to take that on as a bit of a mission as well. And there's some great comments from some employers and people following me on LinkedIn. A lot of people PM me about this very topic, and that's great. It's exactly the point of doing all of these things, Mark. That we can get on this crusade together and make a difference.
I 100% believe that you're onto something here, and I think it's well overdue. My last question before I let you go into the four key takeaways, because I'm conscious we've added, I believe, a ton of value, a lot of questions answered. We've gone over the allotted time that I initially assigned to this, but I believe, you know, I'd be doing you a disservice and those listening and watching this if we don't get some of these questions answered. So, you know, we've alluded to this a few times about the behavioral expert part of what you do. Tell me why that's important.
I'm going to put this into one of my hacks. It's a really good question, but I want to go into explain this in a little bit more detail, because it's I can't answer it effectively in one line. I'd like to, I mean, if I can share my screen with you in a moment, I'd love to show you. What were my hacks again? Let me just.
The CV one was one of them.
Oh yeah. So CV hacks that will take your CV to the top of the pile. So let me deal with that one first. So the CV's job is to get you an interview, no more, no less. And then it's down to your wit, charm, and good looks to get yourself further in the process after that. And there are 4 reasons that an employer will take you on. And these are really important. They're not written down anywhere, and it's just through my experience that I've learned them. So this again is for you, me, and your 12 million followers. Okay. So the first thing is that you need to be able to show an employer where you've made money in previous organisations. I'll qualify these 4 in a minute. So where you've made money, show an employer where you've saved money, show an employer where you've saved time, or show an employer where you've led a team to do one or more of those first 3. So made money, saved time, led a team. And most of the CVs I get have got achievements on there. They're not achievements, they're responsibilities. They are what and whom somebody was responsible for. I mean, that's cool. You've got to be responsible for some stuff. It needs to go in your CV. It's not an achievement. A medal is not an achievement. It might mean something to you. Employers don't care. So the best thing you can do is focus on those 4 and really drill into the detail. So you've got 20 odd years sales experience behind you, Mark. There's a difference between looking at a CV that says I've been responsible for a sales team. Cool. So what? And there's a key there. If you can say, so what? It's not an achievement. So what? Well, my sales team are quite good. So what? You know, what does that make you a good manager? Well, as a result of that, we had targets. So what? Everybody's got targets. Well, you know, the team target was 3 million last year, and we had 5 as a result of my leadership. Ooh, now you've got my interest. And sometimes with one single point, that can make the difference with an employer interviewing you or not. So you've got to put that down in writing. Be as specific as you can with the numbers. Get really dirty with the numbers. You don't need a 10-page CV, because if you've got a 10-page CV, 8 pages of it is nonsense and unnecessary. Make the juicy points really count. And again, if you can say, so what after an achievement, it's not an achievement. You drill right down to the benefit. That's best advice I could give on that.
I hope those that have been watching have waited until this moment, because that is some golden. I mean, that's a job qualifier right there. It's a no-brainer, but and the reason I'm so excited about that little point is because I've seen this time and time and time again as an employer. People coming in and going, oh, these are the things that my team have done. And there's no accountability, there's no action of what they themselves have achieved. It's a lot of responsibilities. And it's like, well, okay, so you basically just listed down your job description. So, yeah, great point. The next one is employers, how to stop making costly bad hires.
Okay, most employers don't think about the behavioural piece when they employ somebody. So we look at 3 levels of assessment. Level 1, over to the left, is that you appear to be right for the job. You've got the right manner, you've got presence about you, I like the cut of your jib, and you come. And low-skilled jobs would tend to be in that category, and they'll just come straight in, no messing. Most employers fall into level 2, so people who can do the job. They've got the knowledge, the skills, the training, the education, and that accounts for about 80% of employers. And that's where offers are made and accepted for the most part. And here's the interesting thing, most people hire on skill and fire on behaviour, because if they're hiring on skill, they will usually test it. A salesperson will do a role play, an engineer fault find something for me, and documentation will be checked through, but attitude really is checked, and you can apply some science to it. That's the good news. So we look at level 3 assessment, where you start to look at your natural behaviour. What's the attitude like? Somebody who will do the job. Massive difference between somebody who can do the job and somebody who will do the job, who's got the right attitude. And we use, to assess for this, a behavioural tool called Contribution Compass. We've used different things to assess. Can you see that? Okay.
There we go.
Yeah, there we go. Right. So if we look, I'll do a real whistle-stop tour, because I could talk about this for 2 hours on my own. I've done a lot of coaching around this, and it's added a huge amount of value to our business. So along the top, we've got activating energy. So if you're somebody with activating energy, you're creative and really good at getting things off the ground. Inspiring energy, that's your value as a coach or working with people. It's all about building relationships. If your contribution is sustaining energy, then where are you with helping people and getting stuff finished? So sustaining energy is all about completion, completing of tasks and managing projects. And finally, refining energy, that's where your value is added as an analyst, for detail and data and things like that. And the purest form of each of the 4 energy types are along the top and the middle. So catalyst, coach, custodian, and conductor. The archetypes off in the corners are a blend of 2 different energy types. Now imagine this: you're an employer, and I'll take your sales example again, Mark, because it's an easy one. Your brief as an employer to me is, okay, Graham, I want to recruit somebody who's a great relationship builder, who can present to people, isn't phased, and who will take our brand and run with it. That is describing a champion. So somebody who can think on their feet, who can act on their feet, who's really good with people, and is very engaging about getting the brand, is the champion of a brand. And that's my profile type, incidentally. And if we found somebody like that for you, that would be a great fit. The chances of that synergy working out there, the client, I've got exactly what they're looking for. Now the skill, of course, if there's a skill involved here, then that would need to be assessed as well, because we clearly couldn't put an engineer into a role where they didn't have the skill to do it. So I'm not saying skill isn't important. I'm saying it has to be in conjunction with the behaviour and the natural behaviour as well. So if at the other end here, if we put somebody forward who was a conductor, for example, a conductor adds value in a different way. And any advice out there to business owners watching this, do your own profile, look at where your strengths are, and surround yourself with people who can fill in around you and can do what you're not good at. Because what you're not good at, somebody excels at. And that's really, really important. This stuff is just not assessed, and for the life of me can't understand why. So we build this kind of stuff into process to help cut down on the hiring mistakes. And we've got a little bad hire calculator that we look at what you would potentially waste on a bad hire if you get it wrong. And if you look at CIPD stats, it can be anywhere between 3 and 5 times the salary. I mean, financially, that is nuts. Why would you invest all that money in somebody who's not going to work out? Assess them properly so you can apply some science to that. And the thing that you don't know when you make a bad hire, that most people don't think about, what internal damage does that bad hire do? They can be a terrorist, an internal terrorist, and destroy your organisation, and good people can leave because of them. And the brand damage that they do externally, you'll never know. You might never find that out. You might lose customers and not even know why. And it could be because of your internal terrorist. So I absolutely stand by this stuff. It's so, so important to do it. If you don't use me or you don't use this tool, then please apply something to it, but use it with some interpretation. It's not the be-all and end-all, but it is in conjunction with good interpretation and good consultation. For me, it's the foundation of good, responsible recruitment.
I think you hit onto quite a few different things over there, because people don't realise the impact. And I'm just thinking of an example, 10 years ago where I got given the responsibility of rejuvenating a sales team. And there was one sales individual who was kind of the key player within the organization, and everybody just praised this person and walked around like they just strutted when they walked into the room. And even though their sales figures were considered pretty good compared to everybody else's, the impact they were having on the team around them was devastating. And nobody had ever spotted this because they didn't want to step on any toes, because you don't want to take out your champion. But ultimately that champion was costing this business literally millions of pounds. Wow. And we had a conversation. Their nose was slightly out of joint. They left, came back about 6 weeks later to come and pay a visit, because with that attitude, it had this, I guess, significance of they won't survive without me. And ironically, the moment that individual was, and that toxic environment had been removed, everybody, and there were 14 other salespeople in that team, all of a sudden stepped up their game, because they weren't in the shadows anymore. And all of a sudden, the whole team as a whole ended up doing about 230, 240% of the production that it had prior to that one individual being there. Yeah. And that impact, certain individuals had, prior to me taking over that team, had left the business. because they were always in the shadow of this person, which they didn't agree with the way that one person did things, because their values weren't aligned with the business. And such a painful experience for a business to go through. But
Yep.
having done what you've just shared over here, that just by going through that process with your existing team as well as recruiting would totally, and that's where the magic happens.
So there was one client a few weeks ago who said, I don't believe this is going to work. I said, talk me through your thought process. And he said, right, we used the champagne analogy. He said, somebody could cheat this. I said, okay. I said, let's play that out then. He said, if I'm going to spend a recruitment fee and get somebody in, he said, this is a really important role. We have to get it right. I said, I understand. I said, so I'm coming in to your organisation. You're looking for a conductor, and I'm a champion at heart, regardless of what my profile says. That's here. I said, how do you assess for that? He said, well, I'm looking at this I'm looking at the sheet in front of me, and I'm seeing a champion, but we need a conductor. So he said, I wouldn't take him on. I said, but let's say I have fooled the system, and I understand how to hack these behavioural assessments. I said, if you take me as an example as a champion, you can dig into the questions to really understand somebody properly. And if you interviewed me like a conductor, you would break me in 3 questions, because I'm not a detail person, I'm not detail focused, it's not here, it's not my natural behaviour. I would really struggle. And what you'll get with somebody whose natural behaviour is not aligned with what you need, you'll just end up getting woolly answers. Somebody who's a true conductor and a true refiner will not do that. They will rub their hands and go, yes, detail, here we go. And they will give you more detail than you probably asked for. So you can't really cheat who you are at the end of the day. You can act to a point, but when you've got a bit of interpretation alongside this, and this is the most reliable way I've found of recruiting the best people with the right behaviour for your team.
So this is like a BS filter, really.
Yeah.
In a nutshell. Loving it. So the next one is what should be what you should be challenging as an employer at an interview.
Right, I've made a couple of notes on this. Just bear with me a second. So I would look at what's so special about working for the organisation. Really think, if you want the best people, you want to try and create a kind of symbiotic relationship there. If you want average people, then ignore that. Who wants to recruit average? Nobody does. But it's very often ignored. So you want to try and get the right kind of balance with somebody. So if you do your homework and look at why somebody should come here, because it should be a two-way sales process. It's not just about the employer having the power, because you want somebody to do a great job for you. You want somebody to bring in loads of money for you. You want somebody to save you loads of time. Whatever one of those 4 options are when we looked at the CV, that's what you would need as an employer. So if you want the best person with the best capability of doing that, you should be selling yourself to them at the same time. That's really really important. And take a little bit of time on when you're putting your job description together as well, to hit the right points. That's your shop window, essentially. That is explaining a bit about the company, the profile, what you're looking for. Don't put management speak and things like that in there. What do you really need this person to do? And here's a great thing that's just occurred to me. If you're preparing your job description in the right way and you know what you're looking for, you can use the language of the contribution compass profile to engage the right sort of people and save yourself time with not attracting the wrong sort of people. Example, we'll come back to the conductor example. You want somebody with a really keen, high eye for detail, who's a data analyst. If you put words like high level of detail, very analytical mind, as a champion, I'm going, that's not the job for me. I wouldn't even apply because it's not my kind of role. But somebody who has got that will be totally engaged by it. And the rest is history as far as I'm concerned. That absolutely works. So you can build a whole system around the recruitment of this to get it right.
So, what you've just touched on there is the language in the recruitment messaging that you use can at the same time save you a ton of time with regard to the recruitment process and ensuring that you're not having the wrong people sit in front of you in the first place.
That's right. And you might not disengage everybody from that process, but you will move quite a lot of people on who'll just look at that and say, oh, that's not for me. It's the wrong sort of language. So you target the correct language for what you actually want. That makes total sense.
Absolutely. It's a no-brainer. Last one, what mistakes can you avoid during the hiring process?
Take time and prepare yourself. It's an interesting one. I think employers get really busy with stuff. And interviews land on them very often. Not always, but very often. And it's, I've got to see this candidate now. There's no prep involved there. If you want to recruit the best people, spend a little bit of time understanding them. Look at the LinkedIn profile. Look at the Facebook profile if you can look it up. You'll start to find out a lot about somebody if you start to do a little bit of digging. I would expect our candidates to be looked up. If we put them forward for an interview, and we would do a check process with them as well. So make sure you do that little bit of background. You might find a bit of insight. You might find you've got similar connections, and you can reference. It's a really useful tool. Get really clear on what's essential and desirable. Essential is what you absolutely can't do without. Desirable is pretty nice to have. And if they've got this, that would be great. But stick to that and be consistent with that. And absolutely do a behavioural assessment. Do a contribution compass before the interview. Because what I can give a customer is I can give them a report. I can give them the CV of the candidate. I can give them a report on their behavioural profile and do a job fit on that. So that the employer can essentially do what we call a job survey, which is an assessment on the job itself. They tell me what energy of person they're looking for, and I align their profile to that and look at where the gaps are and do a gap analysis. If I'm looking at a champion job description and I'm putting a cultivator in front of them, the chances of that hire working out are pretty remote. Yep. Because it's not somebody with aligned behaviour. So that's not going to be a good hire. So I would have a conversation with the employer and explain why we were removing the candidate from the process. Because the chances are minute that would work out, because the natural behaviour is not aligned.
And the impact of taking that wrong person that's got that wrong behaviour, and behaviour is such an interesting one because it's not often something that employers look at, very rarely in fact. And the challenge with that is when that individual steps into whether it be the boardroom or the space with the rest of your employees, and they are not aligned and there's no congruency between them and the role and the team, then automatically you can have that, if you've got two champions in the room, and one of them, as an example, and I've seen this in organizations before, where you've got somebody who is aspiring to take on a role and they've got that champion mindset, and they would be a perfect fit, but their skills need a little bit of work. And then somebody who steps into the role, who have the skills, but they don't have the champion mindset. Yep. You're going to have those two at loggerheads, and you're going to have major challenges of people who are not going to respect the person who's taken on the role.
That's right. I've seen two champions in a room before, working in the same organisation, and it's literally like feathers ruffling on both sides, and they will either get on like brothers or the opposite. There's no in between with something like that. But understanding the nuances around this, a lot of what I do, coming back to one of the questions from earlier around behavioural assessments and why I do this, I do quite a lot of team training now with this model. So I'll spend 4 hours, a 4 hour workshop with a team, looking at where the frictions are in the team. And I can look at a team graph now and identify where I think the challenges are going to be, and it's never wrong. You can see where the conflict starts to emerge, and the number of insight moments I've had, Mac, where people have just gone, oh, now I know why you do that, and it's a real shift. And I think when and coming back to the hiring process, the most basic question in the hiring process is, do I need to recruit? I'm doing myself out of a job here, but sometimes just doing a team session, you might be able to reallocate some jobs with the people you have. You might not need to recruit at all, and you might have a candidate who's just been used in the wrong place, who's completely out of flow and will probably end up disappearing. And anecdotally, if I look at all the teams that I've trained, and I ask them what keeps them in flow and what knocks them out of flow. And a flow state is when you're completely engaged and aligned with what you're doing, when the time just disappears without trace. And we've all had moments like that. Being out of flow is the opposite, where the day just drags. This has been a lightning interview, by the way. So when you're having fun, the time just vanishes. But when I look at teams, on average, I end up with the team being in flow 50 to 60%. Now, if you had a machine that was operating at 50 to 60% efficiency, what would you do with it?
Look for an upgrade, see how you can fix it and get it to be at the optimum.
Totally. You'd either try and repair it or you bin it. But so why do we accept 50 to 60% of our team being in flow? That's nuts, isn't it? But it's fixable.
I think we could probably talk for days if we just break down the individual points into further sections. But clearly your expertise around finding the right candidate is clear. I think one of the things I've realized through this process is it's not just military, ex-military expertise. This applies to anybody who's recruiting. This applies to anybody who's taking on anybody from anywhere. The beauty of this is we've found a great hack with regards to recruiting people with the right mindset earlier, and that's where the veterans are gold dust and making a massive impact to your business. And that mindset shift, I think, is something we really need to work on an education process, whether that be locally in the UK as well as globally, for those people who go and master some phenomenal skill sets. And I still have that image of me of you going to the Gulf War with a trumpet. And,
something you just can't unlearn.
I'm never going to be able to see you.
Sorry about that.
It's all good, but we've hopefully people have taken away some gold dust here today, and we'll go and apply these things. Even if you just take one thing away and go and action it. For me, that's the biggest thing when people watch anything or they go and learn anything. It's really nice to make lots of notes or to watch something, but the key thing is just go and action one thing, because that'll guarantee impact and change tomorrow.
Yeah.
So
I'll add one thing to that. I believe in one of our business coaches, Paul Havens, recommends the 72-hour rule, and the ideas are perishable. So do your one takeaway, but do something within 72 hours. You've got a chance then of making something happen, and that's absolutely brilliant. And thank you so much for doing these podcasts. They're absolutely brilliant and great hacks across a whole range of different subjects to give people some insight and a platform to talk about stuff like this. So very grateful for the opportunity, Mike.
Oh, Graham, it's been a pleasure interviewing you. I've learned so much, and it's been so lovely to speak to somebody who's in a similar kind of wavelength and mindset. And I know that people are going to be watching this and going, okay, well, that's all exciting, but how do I get hold of this Graham guy, because he clearly knows his stuff. So there's going to be two audiences, I'm sure. There's going to be companies who want to find out how they can recruit vets, so that they can get in touch with you, as well as those vets who are looking at this going, well, how do I get this analysis done? How do I find out who I am, how I fit in, get my behavioral analysis done, so that when I walk into a job, I'm kind of set, because you can remove a lot of pain for both the organizations hiring as well as the people that are applying for those jobs. So how do they get hold of you?
Email me, Graham at forcesrecruitment.co.uk. Call me 01353 645 004. Connect with me on LinkedIn, PM me, whatever platform suits you. Be delighted to engage.
Excellent. So I'll make sure that all that information is in the link for the information in the interview. I think we had a code that they can just use so that where they've come from, which is effectively lifehackswithmac/MIB. So ex-military in business. lifehackswithmac-MIB. And that way Graham will remember and know where it's come from, or just mention life hacks, if you contact him directly. And I just wanted to finish this off by just saying a massive thank you to all our vets out there that have served both this country and many other countries out there globally, and made such a big difference. And especially during the COVID period, where it's gone recognized as far as I'm concerned, because I'm seeing a lot of big thank yous to loads of other organizations, and we know which ones. But I had to go for a COVID test recently, and it was the military who were at the test center, and they just get the job done. So I just want to say massive thank you to all our vets out there, and to yourself, Graham, for the wealth of knowledge that you've shared with us today.
Great pleasure. Thanks, Mike.
Excellent stuff. Have a fantastic day, everybody.
Thank you.